we get a lot of calls at our office for, the kids call and say, we know that mom or dad have a power of attorney there, they have a trust there, and now we're, exactly what Jesse said. Mom fell. Doctor said it's not safe for her to go back home. We don't know where to start. The social worker at the hospital gave us a list of 100 assisted living places. We have no idea where to start. That is what Jesse and Oasis help with. They will pare that down for you. They know the ones that will take Medicaid, the ones that'll take, the restrictions that mom or dad might have. So we always start by referring to Oasis and having them find the appropriate place for mom or dad or husband or wife, whoever it is. And then once that's taken care of, then we'll actually have our clients come back to our office to talk about Medicaid planning and Medicaid spend down. So Medicaid is the program that covers long-term care stays. I think probably at this point everybody in the room knows that Medicare is not going to cover you. You need to qualify for Medicaid or have long-term care insurance to cover those long-term care needs. So Medicaid is an asset limit program. You can only apply or qualify for Medicaid if you're under the asset limits. And it's different limits if you're single versus married. So a single person can have a house, all of their household belongings, a car, a prepaid funeral, very small life insurance policies worth less than $1,500, and $2,000 of countable assets. Countable assets is everything that's not listed up there. So that's your bank accounts, that's your annuities, that's the cash value of the life insurance if it's more than $1,500. It's your IRAs, it's your 401ks. Single person, $2,000. Married couples get to keep somewhere between $50,000 and $148,620. They still get to keep the house, the household belongings, the one car. Married couples also get to keep the spouse who's not trying to qualify for Medicaid, the spouse who's staying at home. They get to keep their retirement accounts as well, but everything else is countable. So again, everything in the bank, the annuities, the investments, the brokerage account, and the spouse who is trying to get on Medicaid, their retirement benefits. And that limit is somewhere between $50,000 and about $150,000. So those are the asset limits you need to meet in order to qualify for Medicaid. So what I do with our clients is I spend a lot of time getting people qualified for Medicaid without having to spend down to the very last dollar or the very last $2,000. So I'm going to go through some examples of how we do that. My first example is a single person. So in our example here, we have Mary, who needs to go into assisted living, okay? Her assisted living is going to cost $5,800 per month, which is about average in this area. You might be looking at, $5,000 to $7,000 for assisted living. The assisted living wants her to pay for 2 years before she goes on Medicaid. That's also very common with assisted living in our area. Most of the facilities do accept Medicaid, but they want you to be there for 1, 2, 3 years before you go on Medicaid. 2 years is most common. So that's not unusual that you have to pay your own way for a while before you can go on Medicaid. And what does she have for assets? So let's say Mary already sold her house. So she's got $200,000 in the bank from when she sold her house. And then she's got an IRA with $100,000 in it. So her total estate is about $300,000. And for her income, she's getting Social Security and a pension. And that adds up to just over $2,200. So how can we get her on Medicaid? She's way over the limit right now. For a single person, she can only have $2,000, and she has $300,000. So she's way over the limit. So what we can do is a Medicaid plan for her where we are allowed to gift a portion of her assets to her family. And then we put the remaining assets into a special kind of Medicaid annuity to get her qualified. So what this would look like, given the numbers that she has, the assets she has, we can give away about $214,000. So more than 2/3 we can give away. We can either give that money directly to the family, or we can put it in an irrevocable trust for her. So maybe she's got a son and a daughter and they get along really well, and the son and daughter decide they're just going to take that money and put it in a joint bank account, kind of set it aside as mom's money. But maybe she had a trust set up with our office where she was actually leaving to grandchildren, nieces and nephews. She has a lot of people she's leaving to, and we don't want to divide up the money at this point. We just kind of want to set it aside. And in that situation, maybe we'd then put it in an irrevocable trust just to have somewhere to set it so it's not in her name anymore. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis how we're going to make that gift of the gift amount. And then the rest of the money goes into a special kind of Medicaid annuity. So it's an annuity with pretty strict terms that Medicaid allows us to use. And when we move money into the Medicaid annuity, it no longer counts towards that $2,000 limit. So we can take $86,000 and put it in the annuity. We moved $214,000 out of her name, so now she's under that $2,000 limit because we've moved all of the money around. The annuity is going to pay Mary for 2 years. So every month she's going to get a deposit in her bank account of $3,600. And if you remember, the assisted living is $5,800, and she has $2,200 in monthly income already. So when we add the annuity payment to her monthly income, it's enough to cover the monthly assisted living bill. And we're going to structure that annuity so that it pays her for exactly 2 years. And that's really important for 2 reasons. First, the assisted living said that they want her to pay for 2 years before she can go on Medicaid. So we've got to do what the assisted living wants. They want her to pay for 2 years. Second, when we give away money, we're allowed to give away money, but Medicaid comes back and says, because you gave money away, we're going to assess a penalty. The penalty is a time period. They don't ask for the money back. They don't fine you. They don't tax you. They just assess a time period that says, because you gave money away, we're not going to pay your bill for X number of months. And the way that this works out is if you give away $214,000, Medicaid is going to come back and say, okay, we're not going to pay the bill for the next 2 years. So it works out really well in this example that I created because the annuity lasts for 2 years, the assisted living wants 2 years, and Medicaid says 2 years before you can go on Medicaid. So we were able to protect about over $200,000 by setting up this plan. So now I'm going to do an example. This is my second example now with a married couple. Okay, so now we've got George and Martha, who are a married couple, and George needs to move into a nursing home. Nursing homes typically do not have a private pay requirement. Usually on the day you move in, you could go on Medicaid if you are eligible. Okay, so we don't have to worry about paying for 2 years before going on Medicaid. And it's costing $12,000 a month. So Martha comes to see me and she says, I don't want to write out a check for $12,000 a month. Can you help me? And I say, yes, absolutely. We can get George on Medicaid. The way we're going to do that is by loaning money. So in our example here, George and Martha have $100,000 in a CD in the bank, and then they have $100,000 in stocks. So their total countable assets are $200,000. Again, we don't have to count the car, the house, prepaid funerals, things like that. They are not going to be eligible for Medicaid right now because remember, married couples get to keep somewhere between $50,000 and about $150,000. The way that we calculate how much within that range they get to keep is by adding everything up and dividing by 2. So George and Martha have $200,000. We divide by 2. They are not going to be eligible for Medicaid until we get down to $100,000. So we have $100,000 too much money right now to go on Medicaid. So what would that look like? In order to get rid of or spend down that $100,000, a quick and easy way that we are allowed to do that under Medicaid rules is to loan money to a trusted person. So George and Martha have a son named Billy. They trust him. We're going to take $100,000 and loan it to their son Billy. So we actually have to take the money and move it out of their name. So we take the $100,000 in the bank, and we loan it to the son. It has to be loaned through a special kind of promissory note. So again, Medicaid has rules about this, and we have to make sure we're following the rules. And the promissory note is something that we can do in our office. As soon as that money leaves the checking account and Billy puts it in his own account, we can put in a Medicaid application, and George is going to be eligible because they're now under the $100,000 limit that Medicaid assessed them at. So as soon as that loan is made, we can put in the Medicaid application and George gets approved. Now, this is just a loan, not a gift, so Billy has to pay the money back. The way that works is, again, how Medicaid rules work. Medicaid says that you only have to be under the asset limit when you are applying for Medicaid. After George is approved for Medicaid, Martha could win the lottery the next day, and that's okay under Medicaid rules. So once we have George approved for Medicaid, Billy can repay that loan. So we can actually get George and Martha on Medicaid and still keep all $200,000. We have to temporarily move some of the money out of their names, but once George is approved, that money comes back to Martha and it's still hers to live off of and spend. So we can protect everything they have using this technique. Third example, we're going to turn now to Susan as our example. Susan attended this exact program 6 years ago, 2017, which happened to be the first year I did this program, and I talked about irrevocable trusts in that program. And she thought that sounded really great, and she wanted to do it. She wanted to protect some assets. So Susan has a house worth $300,000, a bank account worth $100,000, and investments or a brokerage account worth $200,000. So how are we going to protect some assets for her? It's with the use of an irrevocable trust. Now, the reason that I said she came to our program 6 years ago is because irrevocable trusts take 5 years before everything in them is protected. So if we move something in the trust, an irrevocable trust today, it's going to be 5 years from today before it's protected. So you have to do a little bit of pre-planning with these and make sure you're not doing this the day before somebody's looking at a memory care or an assisted living. So she sets up her irrevocable trust on December 1st, 2017. She got into our office right away after the program, and we got this set up. What does she put into her trust? She's going to put her house into her trust, and she's going to put her investment account into her trust. So that's $500,000 worth of assets. She also had a bank account worth $100,000. We did not move that into the trust. So she still gets to use her bank account. That's kind of her money that she gets to access. The investment account, she does not get to use. So we wouldn't move that in for her unless she was comfortable with that. So, maybe she's just living off of her Social Security, she's not spending anything, and she feels comfortable moving those investments in. The house, we move the house in, she still gets to live in the house. Nothing really changes with the house. She lives there, she pays the property taxes, the heat, electric, all of that. So that's not really any different to have that in the name of an irrevocable trust. So again, if she waits at least 5 years before applying for Medicaid, she just protected $500,000 worth of assets. So now, let's turn the clock back to today. It's been 6 years, right? She did that in 2017. So now today, 6 years later, she needs to move into an assisted living facility. So everything in her trust would be protected because she made it through that 5-year look back. It's like that asset or those assets never existed. That $500,000 worth of assets is not going to come into the equation when we look at Medicaid. But she still has $100,000 in the bank. She never spent any of her money. And so when she goes to apply for Medicaid as a single person, she is only allowed to have $2,000. So right now she would still be $98,000 over the limit. So we can still do a Medicaid plan for her at this point to protect even more assets. And we would do it the exact same way we did in the first example with a single person going into an assisted living. So with the $100,000 she has left, what we could do is we could move about $64,000 out of her name, again, as a gift to her children, or move it into an irrevocable trust. She would need the remaining money, which would be about $36,000, to cover the cost of her assisted living. So in this example, she gets $2,000 a month for Social Security. It costs $5,000 a month in the assisted living. So she needs an extra $3,000 every month to cover that cost. So that's why we need $36,000 to cover the cost. And this example works because this assisted living only wants 1 year of private pay. So if the assisted living wanted 2 years of private pay, we probably wouldn't be able to do this because she would need enough money left in her name to pay for 2 years. So when we're talking about Medicaid planning, we always have to be aware of kind of two sets of rules: the actual Medicaid rules and then the facility rules. What does the facility want or expect? But we can do a combination of planning where you can plan ahead with an irrevocable trust. And then if you still have money left in your name when the time comes, if the time comes to look at a facility, we can still protect more money at that time in most situations. So again, just simple examples of the kind of work we do. Every case is different. We kind of have to take these on a case-by-case basis to see what we're able to do, how much we're able to protect. But just want everyone to know that there are ways to protect the money. You don't have to spend down to $150,000 if you're married, or all the way down to $2,000 if you're single. And when you go to, the assisted living or the social worker at the hospital, or even ADRC, which is the county, they will often just tell you what the Medicaid rules are. You've got to spend down to $2,000 and then come back and apply. So just be aware that there are ways to get on Medicaid before that time. Okay. Oh, there's a question.
So you have a couple,
Mm-hmm.
and the IRA is protected with the spouse's family. Then is that part of the calculation? Then that's separate from the 148,000?
Correct, yeah. So the question is, if you've got a married couple and the spouse who is not going into a facility has an IRA, their IRA is not included in that 148,000. So you could have a spouse with a $500,000 IRA. That does not count at all. That's completely protected. It does not factor in. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn it back over.